Hello everybody and welcome to Adobe Live. We would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land in which we are creating and streaming from today, and also pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. My name is Flynn, I'm hosting today and I'm here with fantastic Bill Hope. Hey Bill.
Hey everybody, how you doing?
We are good. We started behind the scenes today, finding out if a tree falls in the forest, if it actually makes a sound, and we couldn't conclude it. But what if you record it? Anyway, something to discuss. Hey chat, what's going on? We've got Gareth in here, Umacorn as well, Alessandra, Johanna. It's great to have you here with us today. There was a great stream yesterday. We'll probably do a bit of a recap, Bill, I think, before we get started. But then we're going to get into some other stuff today, which has been really cool, doing reveal animations with Bill. We had a great time.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it was good. We were sort of switching between apps, and I sort of stepped through the process of how to make this kind of simple reveal animation. I might just go right ahead and show on my screen what we did yesterday. So we kind of had this a little body. That's great. So we kind of had this drawing of a little light bulb, and we took it into Illustrator and added some sort of vector lines on top of it, and then took that file into After Effects and got this animation effect going on where you sort of see it appearing on screen. So that was really good, and it was a really great stream, but I'm keen to try something slightly more ambitious today. And what that is I want to sort of do a similar kind of reveal animation where we're going to see something appearing on the screen. But I want to try and do something that's kind of a bit more naturalistic, something that's mimicking drawing on paper. So we're going to try and use some sort of natural textures, some natural brushes, something that might look like ink or watercolor or that kind of thing. And we're going to see if we can animate that in an interesting way to sort of see these pencil marks and these ink marks and these watercolor marks appear as an animation. So quite a lot to get through, so I'll dive right into it. Because there's quite a few different techniques and styles of animation that we're going to play around with today, I'm going to keep the subject matter very simple. So we're drawing an apple. Now what I've done is I want to kind of think about like what are the steps. Like if I was going to storyboard this animation, what would it look like? And I want to sort of initially see some sort of simple pencil marks appearing on the screen, and then I want to see a sort of a sketch appear, and after that we've got a pencil sketch. I want to see some ink lines appear on top of that. Then after that I want to see some watercolors be painted down underneath the ink, and finally, if we've got time, maybe we'll do a little bit of frame-by-frame animation on top of that. So that's kind of like my concept that I'm thinking about.
I like it.
Yeah,
it's a lot.
Yeah.
Right. I'll just mute my mic and just sit back so I don't interrupt you.
No, it's all good. It's all good. So, I mean, we're going to be using the same techniques that we used on Waddy the light bulb here, of these lines appearing. So we'll do a little bit of that. But because I want it to be sort of really naturalistic at the start, I thought I would just sort of do a little bit of screen recording as well, and we'll incorporate some of the screen record animation into some of the more digital animation. And the way that I did that is I've just on an iPad using the Adobe Fresco app, is I've just done a little screen record that you can see here of me sketching out a simple apple. And I want to use this as kind of like the framework from where we're going to jump off to do the rest of the animation. So we've got this sort of video of just this basic apple appearing. So what I might do is I might just pause that video there, and I'm just going to take a screenshot of the apple, and this can be the template that we work off. And once we've got that into Photoshop, we can start adding some other elements. So I'm just going to drop that apple into Photoshop. So the first part of our animation is kind of done because we've got this loose sketch, which is just a video that a screen recording that I've done in Fresco. But I want some sort of ink lines to appear on top of that. So what I might do is I'll just drop off the opacity of our apple there, and we'll make a new layer, and I'll get a brush. So I'm going to use this ink brush I've used 1,000 times before on this stream, which is just a nice scratchy ink brush. And I'll just work on top of my apple here. So
that's a nice brush.
Yeah, nice bit of texture coming out there. But we'll add a couple more things as we go along to sort of make this feel nice and sort of naturalistic. So not worrying, it's kind of cartoony, just sort of little sketch of an apple. So that'll do. Now I wanted to animate this with a watercolor texture on a textured paper underneath. So I've got a photo of some watercolor paper over here, and I'm just going to drag and drop that in to my Photoshop file so I can kind of see what I'm working with. So let's drop that down.
So this is just a texture background. Is that something you always like to have? Is it just because you don't want to be working on white, or is it something that's part of the
no, I don't always do this. Sometimes when you're drawing digitally, you're trying to sort of pretend that you're drawing on paper, and often I'll use a texture like this, but for the most time I'm just working on a white background. So that's looking okay, but it's not looking super naturalistic because this line work is incredibly bold, and you don't often see that in real life, such stark dark line work on top of paper. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a clipping mask on top of that. I'm going to paint a little bit into my line work. So if I make a new layer on top and I clip to the line work underneath, I'm just going to get a soft brush and I'm just going to add a little bit of color to my line work, and I'm just going to dull it down a little bit. So I'm going to use some dark browns and some dark reds. And I'm just going to add a little bit of sort of colored character to that line work there. It's quite subtle, but it's going to add a little bit. Once I've got that color, I might mask a little bit of that because you want a little bit of transparency to come through in your line work. So I'm going to paint into that mask that I've set up here. So let me just get that, and I'm just going to add a little bit of texture to my line to kind of knock it back a little bit more. Right.
And so you originally drew this with just black or kind of a darkish kind of charcoaly kind of color. So why do it this way instead of just starting with a color?
I just have a bit more control this way. I can kind of just focus on, I'm just getting the line work right now, and now I'm focusing on the color and the texture. And we've talked about this before on the stream lots of times about like a non-destructive workflow. The way I do this, I can always go back and make changes as I go. I don't have to, I'm not sort of destroying any information as I go along. So yeah, I'm just going to paint a little bit of texture into that line work and sort of mess it up a little bit. And that's feeling a little bit more natural. And I might just go ahead and just drop the opacity overall of that line work. So that's feeling good. So now we've got, so if we're imagining how it's going to look as an animation, Apple's going to appear as a sketch. And then on top of that, we want our nice neat line work to appear on top of that. So these will be the steps that we'll work through once we get into After Effects and we start animating. So I might just finish my apple as a static frame, and then we'll start taking all of those assets that I've created into After Effects and start working with those there. So now I'm going to add a little bit of watercolor to my apple. So I'll open up a new layer, and we've talked about a million times on the stream before of downloading brushes from Kyle T. Webster through the Adobe website. And if you open up your brushes tab, there's a little link here that says get more brushes. But one thing you may not know is that there's sort of it's like fashion. There's a new seasonal range of brushes that comes out. So I recently downloaded, well, actually a year ago now, I would have downloaded the summer 2022 pack. And you just get all these cool new brushes that are released by Adobe. So
if you're in the Southern Hemisphere, the seasons are off.
Ah, right, okay.
Which I always find really funny. Like, there's often brands and they're like, here comes our summer collection. And it's like, it's cold here.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I'm not that far out then. So so you can see I'm painting with this brush and I'm getting this really nice texture that's feeling relatively like a natural watercolor brush. So I might change around my tones a little bit and try and sort of layer up this apple to get a couple different.
And is an apple your favorite fruit? I know you had a pear as part of your wonderful sounding breakfast before yesterday's stream.
Apple. I'd say it's my go-to. It's sort of a very safe choice, the old Apple. But I feel like king of the fruit's got to be a mango for me.
Fancy.
Yeah, I don't know. What about you, Flynn? Any strong preference?
I think bananas are the go-to, but they
Yeah.
are risky because it's kind of like there's a very short window.
Yes,
You can have
yeah.
a good
You know,
banana.
you're living on the edge when you're going for bananas every day. Okay, so I won't go into all the details of sort of what I'm working on here, but I'm trying to just build up a bit of fine color and get some features that I like in this apple. I might add a little bit of color for the leaf. And I'm making sure that I'm keeping all my elements on separate layers here, because we're going to be going back and sort of adding all sorts of different effects to this apple as we go along.
Is that a bit of like yellow that you put in there in the top of the highlight of the apple?
Yeah, I've just sort of selected a section of the apple. So I can select with my lasso tool there. And then I'm using the select and mask feature to sort of blur my selection a little bit. And then I'm just using the hue sliders to sort of, I can then, oh, I'm on the wrong layer. Then I can really sort of subtly change the color of that apple there without messing. With watercolors, you don't want to overlay, you don't want to overwork it too much, otherwise you lose this nice texture. So I like to sort of get the texture right and then focus on the tone. Yeah, I'm relatively happy with that. I might brighten it up a little bit, make it a slightly more cheerful apple. And I might go back and erase a couple little sections to give us a bit of a highlight on our apple as well. Okay, that's looking just about fine for our sketch. So we've got basically 4 sections of our animation so far. We've got 3 sections so far. We've got our sketch, which will appear initially. We've got our watercolor, and then we've got our line worker on top. And I'm going to use sort of different methods for each of these sections of this apple to get these to appear. But I wanted this one to be a slightly more ambitious stream, so I'm going to add one more additional effect to this. And what I wanted to do is, I'm kind of imagining how this is going to appear on screen. And often when you start drawing, you might do a couple little tentative marks to kind of warm yourself up before getting fully into the drawing. And I want to see if we can get those to appear in our animation as well. So I'm just going to draw with a nice natural pencil brush. I'm going to get out, where's my nice pencil brush? I think that's the one. Is that the one? Yeah. And I'm just going to make a couple little brush strokes like this. And I want to see if we can get these simple brush strokes like that to appear on our animation. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do 1 or 2 of these simple little brush strokes. And then I might make a new layer and add 1 more. And then we're going to see if we can incorporate these into the overall animation as well. I know this is all feeling a little abstract at this point, but I promise it'll all come together.
I like it. I'm interested to see where this is going to go.
Yeah. Well, me too, Flynn. You and me both. Okay, so I'm going to just save that PSD file. And let's move around into our other apps. Okay, so let's go into After Effects. So I've opened up a new composition in After Effects, and this is just, I'm going with a square format this time, because I'm kind of keen to see if I can use this on a phone, and I want to use it horizontally and vertically, so I'm sort of giving myself a bit of extra real estate.
Right.
I've made it a minute long, but we'll probably make it shorter than that. And I'm just going to start dropping some assets into this composition in After Effects. So I'm going to bring over my watercolor paper texture. We can drop that into our frame. And what else do we need? We will need our Apple file. So let's drop that in. Now, After Effects is going to ask me a couple of questions. it's going to ask me if I want to keep it as a composition, and I'd like to retain the layer sizes. That's an important point. And I want to keep them as editable layer styles. So I'm also going to say OK, and we've got our apple here. Okay, great. So it's opened as a folder here, and I should be able to just drag and drop all my sections into our composition. And I've done so, and here they are. Okay.
Awesome. And this is a similar method that we did, like just to confirm, this is literally just a PSD file with those layers in there. And yesterday, if you caught some of that stream or if you missed it, did a similar sort of thing, creating vector lines for some kind of pathing animation in Illustrator. The same thing, just save it as an Illustrator and then make file and then bring it into After Effects. And if you bring it in a similar way, you can have all of those different elements there, which is really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. So after my mistakes of not labeling my layers yesterday, I'm going to try and fix my ways, and I'm going to label some of these layers. So I'm going to call this one. Oh. So you can just press enter on your layer. So we'll call that one leaf. We've got watercolor red. What's this? Brush strokes. So we'll just call that one B1. And then we've got brushstroke 2, and we'll call that one B2.
There's continuing the banana theme.
Yeah.
For sure. We have characters in Australia called B1 and B2. I don't know if that's international. Probably not. But,
no, they're
Australian, isn't it?
I'm
thinking,
very
Australian.
Yeah, I think Sesame Street does get a little bit of play overseas, but I'm not sure how much. Okay, so let me just move some of those sections, and we'll make sure all our layers are in the right area. If I lay those all back on top of each other, yeah, we should have our apple. So that's looking good. Now, let's go step by step. So I think I'll start with getting that initial sketch to appear on our piece of paper with our apple. So I won't worry about those later stages. One additional element that I was missing was the video that I recorded, which was this one here of me sketching in fresco. So I'm gonna just drag and drop that as well into my composition, and we'll bring that into our timeline. So now if I play that through, we can see our apple appearing. I've got a few, I need to get rid of the UI of Fresco here, so I'm just going to crop my video from the start so we can lose all of that stuff. And then we can crop it again before the UI appears. And now we've just got the apple appearing. And the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just use the rectangle tool to draw a mask around my apple. And now we can just see our apple appearing. Oh,
using a bit of the leaf up the top.
Yes, I've just noticed that. I think I can just move that. I can just change my mask there. So that's all in place. Okay, great. Now we're still getting the white background of our apple appearing, and we don't want that, but there's luckily a nice easy fix for that, and that is just to change our mode to multiply.
Good old multiply.
And then good old multiply, saving us every time. And now that will help. I'll just move that slightly so that brush doesn't appear. And that's looking really good. So now we can just play through, and we've got our apple appearing from our screen grab onto the watercolor paper. Now I just need to make sure that I've got that in the right position to play over my existing apple. So I'm just going to reposition that a little bit. Might need to shrink it down ever so slightly. Oh, wrong one. Okay, I think that will do. Okay, so we've got our sketch, and then our ink line should appear over the top of that. Now I want my sketch to, I think we're going to get the sketch to just fade away after a point, so I won't worry about extending that out for the rest of the video. All right, so our next challenge is going to be to get the ink line to appear. So the way that we're going to do that is that we're going to use the same effect that we did last stream, where we're taking our ink line into Illustrator. We're going to put some vector lines over the top of that, and then we'll use those vector lines to make it reveal in After Effects. So let's go ahead and go through those steps. So I'm going to go back into Photoshop, just copying my line work, and then I will go into my Illustrator file that I've got set up here. So let's just drop that in. And like we did last time, I'm just going to get the pencil tool, which has temporarily eluded me. Where's it gone?
You're going full suite, full creative suite with this Illustrator.
Yeah,
Photoshop, After
we're
Effects,
flying all over the
also
place.
Fresco.
If there's anybody who has any questions they'd like me to answer or anything I can help with, please do just let me know. Unfortunately, I seem to have misplaced my pencil tool.
There was a question around drawing fruit. Alessandra asks, Bill, is there food or fruit you're asked to draw and it seemed easy when you started drawing, ran into some obstacles?
That's a good question. I can't say I've had any really difficult fruit conundrums, but my wife is actually working on a children's book right now, and she's been asked to draw mangoes that have been halved, and then done that thing where you cube it and flip it in half.
Right.
And that's really tricky. That's sort of taking a half sphere, cubing it, and then inverting it upside down into these little cubes on top of a half dome or something. And that's got really confusing. So that's been a very tricky fruit that she's having to work through. Sorry guys, I've just gone and misplaced my pencil tool. So I think I'm just going to use the pen tool for this one instead. And I'm just going to change the workplace back to Essential. So I've got my layers and, oh, here's the pencil tool. Okay. So I'm going to draw a line over the top of our ink line work, and I'm just going to make sure it covers off all the different sections. And I'm trying, like we said last stream, I'm just trying to sort of replicate how I would draw this from scratch. So let's change the stroke of that mark a little bit. I've got the stroke, so I'm going to increase the weight of that until it covers the line work that we had before. Okay, and now I'm going to just be moving that line around gently to cover off our ink line work, making sure it's all nicely covered up. Okay, that's looking about right. Okay, so that's all we really need to do in this section. I'm just going to go ahead and save that. So I'll save it in, we're going into number 2, and this is Apple AI. So we've just made a vector line that traces over our apple and is covering over all our line work like we did last stream. There's a couple of steps that I've kind of rushed over here, but if you're keen to try this animation yourself, just go back to last stream.
I just love anybody joining right now and just seeing this this apple.
This apple.
Like, welcome to Adobe Live. What's up? We're here with
These are brilliant things to come up with. Lifelong artist, working away here.
It's just someone tuning in and then tuning out straight away. Just going, no.
Okay, so I'm going to take my AI apple and I'm just going to drop it in. Again, I'm going to get a little pop-up box and I'm going to make sure it's called the composition and it's document size, and that's all worked out. So we're going to take our apple and drop it into our timeline, and I'm just going to make sure that I resize that so it's the same size as our existing apple.
Did you resize the original apple, or I'm wondering why that didn't come in at exactly the same size, because you traced over the original drawing?
Yes, there are. To be honest, I don't really understand how After Effects imports different file sizes.
Trying to remember the step that you shrunk, but I don't think you did. So yeah, something's
changed. There is a way to make that work, but I'm afraid that's slightly beyond me.
It's cool. I don't know.
Okay, so we're going to just quickly go through the same process we did in the previous stream, where we were using the trim paths function in After Effects. And this is going to allow us to kind of reveal that line like we were talking about. So I'm just going to go ahead and turn this Illustrator line. It's you just right click it and go create shapes from vector layer. So it's taking the Illustrator vector file and turning it into a shape, which is kind of After Effects way of thinking about vectors. And now I can take the drop down menu on that shape layer, and I'm going to apply the trim paths function. Now, if I go do that again, we'll do what we did last time, where we're reducing the end of the line. So we're sort of reversing that line back to its start. I'm just taking that percentage down to 0. And we're going to let that reveal over a nice long 5 seconds duration, I think. So let's add a keyframe at 5 seconds and bring it back up to 100%. And we can see our line play out on top of our apple. And once we've got that line down, I'm going to go down to my ink line layer, and we're going to apply a track matte. So this is the process that we talked about yesterday, where we're using the track matte to allow our ink line to be drawn on. I've kind of rushed it a little bit. It's not a perfectly clear reveal of that line there, but if we wanted to, we could go back into Illustrator and sort of really make it a very sort of specific thin line that would trace around all the lines beautifully. But for our purposes...
Totally for our purposes today, definitely. But I don't see anything wrong with it. What are you seeing in there that you think isn't perfect?
It's quite subtle, but I'll show you close up. So if we look here, you can see how the vector line that we were able to see before, you can see how it's got that sort of big bold end there to the line. And if we get rid of that line, you can see it's applied the same thing to the ink mark here. And that's not a very naturalistic way of that line to appear. Right. And again, here you can see it's as the line appears, it's included some of those other little thin lines there. Right. So it's something you only really notice close up, but while it's moving, it looks fine. So I'm being a bit finicky there.
Okay, cool. I just wanted to see if I was missing something in there, but yeah, okay. It's just the attention to detail kind of thing, and you would know when you're creating the vector lines, if you're trying to get it to be perfect, that this is a thicker line, so I can use a thicker stroke weight when I'm doing it in Illustrator, and then I would use a smaller one for the leaves, etc. Okay, cool.
Exactly.
Just in case someone's following along and they're thinking the same thing, like, hey, this is pretty good. What's going on? What's the problem?
So now if we combine those two elements that we had, so we had our original screen record pencil sketch, and now if I've moved the ink line down on the timeline, the ink line starts to appear on top of the pencil sketch underneath. And it's getting a bit messy at that point. So I'm going to go ahead and let the pencil work fade away so we just see the line work. So as the ink line work of the apple is about to finish, I'm going to say at about this point, I want my pencil sketch to just kind of fade into the distance. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to go down to transform. I'm going to add a keyframe for the opacity, and I'm going to bring that opacity down to 0. Then a couple seconds back from that, well, we're about maybe when the line just starts to appear, I'm going to bring that opacity back up to 100%. And now our line work just kind of slowly fades away as the line appears. And that feels like a nice transition. So I'll just zoom in a little bit so you can see what we're doing. So we've got a pencil sketch appearing, slowly starts to fade away as the line work takes its place.
Nice.
So that's feeling like it's working okay. So now it's time to start adding the watercolor. So and I'm really keen to show you guys the process that I've been using for this, because it looks really cool. So if we add in our red watercolor that we've got labeled here in our keyframe, we'll bring it down to the right position. I want to find some interesting way to make this watercolor appear. It could just fade in, but it'd be nice to have some kind of movement, something that makes it feel a little bit more natural. And I'm going to use the same strategy that I used with the vector line revealing. We made a track mask to make the line appear underneath. And you can do this with all kinds of video textures. So over the years, I've been putting together a folder of kind of different fun textures that I've made. So there's some sort of interesting swirly shapes. And most of these I've also just made in the Fresco app on the iPad by just screen recording myself using different brushes. And the watercolor brushes have these lovely textures in Fresco. So I love just kind of capturing those textures. And I've even made some that I'm just filming on paper as well. So this is me dropping a bit of ink into some water. Wow. And I'm sort of slowly trying to build up a collection of...
creating your own different stock library of...
Yeah, make my own stock library of textures to work with. So I want to find one like this that will be a nice way of revealing that red color of our apple. And I think this one, because it's a nice circular shape, is going to be a good one for us to use. So I've got that video there, and I'm just going to drag that into our composition as well.
I love that. Like, I love it when people use apps, like, and just not in the way that were intended at all.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure that wasn't
designed for. Like, maybe someone somewhere thought, oh, maybe, but I really don't think so. It's so great, like, to use Fresco watercolor apps to create like this animation that you can bring in and then use in After Effects for a reveal.
Yeah, and
it's just
and
really
kind
creative.
It's a really fun process. So I'm going to just look on my timeline. I think I want my watercolor to appear just before the ink line finishes drawing. So maybe at this point here, I'll bring in this animation of this swirly shape. Now you can see it's just that black swirl that's filling in the apple right now, but we want that to be filling in the red color that we'd already drawn. And the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to go down to my red layer, which is hidden underneath there. And I'm going to go across to track matte. And just like we did before with the vector line, I'm going to click alpha matte. Oh, not alpha matte. Sorry, I'm going to have to go through the mattes and see which one I meant to use. Luma matte? No, it's inverted Luma matte.
Of course,
Luma inverted matte. Yeah, there you go.
Wow,
and now you can see our red color is appearing using the texture of the black and white video that we inputted before. And it leaves us with this really nice sort of subtle effect of the color appearing. So we've got a line appearing.
I love it. I'm so impressed.
Cool. I'm really glad you like it. And yeah, the watercolor sort of nicely fills up our apple there. One thing I forgot to do is that I need to make sure that this video stays in place and extends throughout the duration of our composition. So I'm going to do something that we did last time, which is where I just go to, I can just add a function called freeze on last frame, and that will just continue for the rest of our composition. So now my red texture should stay in place for the rest of the video. So we had our leaf color, which was just down here. I'll turn that on as well. And I might try and do exactly the same thing, but with a different texture for our leaf. So after the red appears, I might get the green to appear at this point. So let me just go back into our library and find another texture that looks good. This one seems like it would work well, so I'm going to bring that into After Effects. And same thing, I'm going to take that little bit of video, and I'm going to just make sure it sits where I want it above the leaf texture here. So now it should fill in the leaf texture nicely on top there. I'll do the same thing of freezing on the last frame, so that goes the whole way to the end. And now I will do the track matte, Luma inverted matte on our leaf. And now our leaf should just nicely sketch itself in at the right time there.
Wow.
Just make sure that's positioned in the right place. There we go. All right, now that's all feeling pretty good. Let's play our video out from the start here. I just need to make sure the leaf isn't there. Okay, it's playing. Okay.
Playing
So
and rendering at the same time. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. So we've got our sketch appearing. Our line work appears on top, and then we're getting our colors start to appear there as well. All right. How are we going for time?
That's
We're
beautiful. About 20 minutes left. 15, 20 minutes
20
left.
minutes
Something
left.
like that. Yeah.
Okay, we've got time. We've also got time for questions, if anybody has any questions. I know this is a bit of a sort of scattered process that I've been working through. But yeah, if you've got any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat and I'll do what I can.
Yeah, let us know. And I think there was a bit of chatter as well about getting you to do it. Maybe the next stream can be on creating your own textures, like creating your own library.
Oh yeah,
textures.
okay.
That could be really cool.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to see like what apps you would go to. Like obviously you've shown sort of Fresco there, but like the difference between like Fresco and maybe Photoshop or something like that. Maybe the sorts of things you want to look for, how you want to save things. Like even just insight into why you're building your library and like what you're thinking that your applications might be, because this is some out of box kind of thinking from my perspective.
Cool.
That could be really cool.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots to. Sorry, can you hear my audio? Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Oh, okay, no worries.
Yep.
It just sounded slightly different. Yes, so yeah, it would be really good to do a stream because a lot of the textures I do, I really like making ones that sort of have a really natural feel. And there's a lot of great stuff that you can do digitally, but it's really fun making brushes and textures on paper and getting so sort of scribbling some charcoal onto some watercolor paper and scanning that in and then using those to make textures. And because you always get something a bit more interesting using the natural sort of original inspiration or something like that. So we talked about maybe adding a couple little brush strokes at the start of the stream to sort of imagine someone sort of making their first initial strokes on the paper. So what I'm doing here is I'm just taking a brush stroke and I'm going to, let me just find video layer. I'll get rid of that. And I want to sort of get this little brush stroke to appear on the paper, and we'll maybe try a couple different ones. So we'll have one there and maybe one other brush stroke here. So I'm just going to try and position those where it feels natural that someone might make these marks on paper. And we're going to do exactly the same thing that we've been doing in the past of sort of bringing a texture into After Effects and then using that as a track matte to reveal something. But we're going to do it in just a slightly different way here. So I've made some other textures, which I'm just calling brush big. So this is you can see just a big black shape with some texture at the end that I've sketched in Photoshop. And that's just a PNG file. So I'm going to drag and drop that into After Effects. And now if I bring that into my composition, you can see I've got this big block of color here. And I'm going to kind of use this, I'm going to move this block around, and it's going to dictate which parts of the which parts of other layers are revealed. That's a little complicated to get your head around, but I'll just do it now and show you what I mean. So if I take this this block, I kind of want this line here to just sort of appear from the top right down to the bottom left. So I'm going to mimic that movement with this big block that I've got here. So I'm going to take this block and right at the start of our animation. And I want this to be a nice quick movement. So I'm going to just go down to transform, and I'm going to make a keyframe for its position. And then just a second later, I'm going to move it over my little brush mark that I've made. So it's a really quick just movement like so. Actually, it could be even faster than that. Let's bring it in a little bit, make it really nice and quick. So it's just going to move on top like that. So now once I've got that movement, I can find my brush mark that was beneath it. So it was, I believe, this brush mark that I'm clicking on and off. And I'm going to do the same thing we did before, just making alpha track matte. So it's moving on top. Oh, I've done the wrong one.
The bottom one, I think,
So,
isn't it?
yeah, the bottom one. Alpha track matte. And now, still not going. What's going on here? Is it Sorry, I'm just having to cycle through my track mats and see which one's
It's like
working.
when you're trying to find an adjustment layer that works really well before you end up settling on multiply anyway in the end. You just gotta try them all out.
Okay, well we've got it now. So now you can see as that big block moves over, it's sort of replicating the motion of that line naturally appearing. So if we play it through, you can see our line just appearing there. So it's a really simple little animation, but it feels relatively natural on that paper.
Yeah, it's quite a like subtle thing, but
Mm.
obviously your eye and your subconscious picks up so much more. Like it would look very mechanical if you were just doing a sort of digital wipe, right? Like if you do a left to right wipe over something that is a textured drawing, it's even if you don't pick it up, consciously, subconsciously, it's kind of like, it just kind of looks a little bit, digital.
Yeah, and it's that soft texture on the edge there that's really giving it that natural feel.
Yeah.
If it was a hard line that was wiping across, it just wouldn't feel right. So let's just so we've got our first mark appearing right at the start, and then just after that, I'll get this mark to appear. So I'll do the same thing I did before, going transform, position, we'll move it on top of our line, and then just so just a second later, we'll move it on top of our line. So we've got that motion appearing. That could be faster again. And again, we'll do the same thing. We'll make sure it's on top of the right file, and we'll go alpha matte. So now we've got our two lines appearing just one after another. And then our sketch starts to appear on top of that. It's not perfect. I could have matched up the textures of the pencil a little bit better, but I'm happy enough with how that looks for our purposes. Okay, let's zoom out a little bit. And I'm just going to do the same thing I did before with these pencil marks of just fading them away at a time that feels appropriate.
Cool. And while Bill's working on that as well, we might have a little bit of time today. Rarely we have time. Usually we run out of time like we did yesterday. But if you've got any more questions, I've got 2 questions in here. We could probably maybe have time for 1 or 2 more on top of that. So if you want to throw them in
go for
chat, anything and everything to do with illustration or art, maybe freelancing as well. Breakfast,
Yeah.
everything that Bill is an expert in. Don't be shy, throw it in. We'll do our best to get to all of them. You do this at the end of a stream, and then we won't get to like the last question or something, and I'll feel bad.
Yeah.
We'll do our best.
Okay, so I'm just putting in those opacity keyframes to just make sure those lines disappear. Okay, let's just play through our animation once and see how it's all looking so far. So we've got our 2 initial lines appearing, then the rest of our sketch is just appearing on top of that. And then we should have our watercolor appearing on top of that. Oh no, I've turned those layers off. Let's just go up and find those again. And our leaf as well. Okay, great. So we've got our watercolor interior and our leaf appearing there. Okay, so we've got about 10 minutes left, don't we, Flynn? And I'm feeling somewhat adventurous here. So I think I'm going to go ahead and turn all of that into one big old pre-comp. Simplify things for us. And this is basically the After Effects equivalent of putting everything into a folder that I can manipulate independently. And I had pre-worked up a little bit of frame-by-frame animation. And I'm going to see if we can sort of add to the end of this apple appearing as kind of the piece de resistance at the end. So let me open up that file. So I thought it'd be cute if a little worm appeared out of the side of our apple. So all I've done is I've taken...
today. I'm so impressed. It's great.
Yeah, I'm just going all out with this one. So we've got our little sketch of an apple, and you can see I've just made layers in Photoshop of frame by frame, simply drawing this really basic little worm appearing.
Oh my god! I
from
love this worm's
apple
face on that final frame. That's outrageously cute.
And we're going to do our best to try and import this into After Effects and play these frames out, animating on top of our apple. So I'll just close that one. And we'll go back to After Effects, and we'll just do the same thing we did before of dragging and dropping worm PSD into After Effects. Again, I want to keep the composition, I want to retain layer sizes and editable layer styles as I import. And we'll say that's okay. So I'm just going to drag and drop our little wormy friend in there. And now if I double click on the worm PSD file, it'll take me into kind of the equivalent of the Photoshop file in After Effects, where I've got all my layers individually here. And you can see they're all the same length and they're all stacked on top of each other, but I want them to play, each of the layers, I want them to play sequentially as a frame by frame animation. So the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to select all of my worm layers, so all the layers that have a little bit of worm on them. That's the first one. And I'm going to reduce all of those down to just a few frames each one. So if we zoom right in on our timeline, I'm going to reduce each one down to maybe like 4 frames or something. Okay, so I've got them down to 4 frames, so they're really quickly playing after each other. And now I think there is a quick way to do this. I'm just going to slowly drag each frame on the timeline until they just play sequentially after each other. And now we've got our little worm appearing. It's that easy.
That's awesome.
I think I actually missed a frame, so I'm just going to zoom in and bring this guy in. Yes, I just missed one frame there. But there we go, we've got a little frame worm appearing. Now I wanted to just freeze on the last frame, so I'm just going to click on that last one that we've got, and I'll just drag that right out until the end of our composition.
Can you do the hold keyframe on that as well? Or...
you could do that.
You could do it either way.
But I've just dragged it out to the end of the composition. And now I don't need any of those layers underneath that. So I'm just going to disappear those two. So now if I go back into my main composition, our little worm friend appears, but he's appearing a little bit early there. So I'll choose a point, maybe about 20 seconds in, and it might be time for our worm to make a debut then. And also, I'll just need to make sure I've got him in the right position as well. So now, if we play it back, we've got our apple magically appearing in front of us, and hopefully a little worm appears in front of it as well.
Buddy.
Little
That's
buddy. Awesome. Okay, so we've got our 2 initial lines, our sketch, our watercolor underneath the line work, and our little worm friend appearing. All right, and that's all feeling really good.
Awesome. That was one of the most fun streams I think we've ever done, and we've done some really fun streams. I love that. You're so ambitious today. Like,
cool.
Going across 4
Well, we're not
apps,
done. How long have we got left? We've got 5 minutes left.
About 5 minutes left. Yeah, I got a couple of
I just
questions
want to do one
as well. So.
Oh no, okay. Go ahead with the questions. Yeah. What do you got?
I should be more prepared. How long have you been animating in your work? Is it a skill that you've been experimenting with on and off?
I've been experimenting. I kind of started looking at After Effects, and I was doing a bit of frame-by-frame animation kind of at the start of COVID. So it was kind of like one of my little lockdown things that I was working on. So I've been messing about with it sort of on and off for about 3 years now. And it's not something that I do. Very rarely do I do it sort of commercially for work. But increasingly, it's sort of coming up more and more often. People are asking for this kind of thing. It's something I really enjoy playing around with. I mean, when I was a kid, I loved playing with Flash animation. I did like all the little stick figure animations and things like that.
Oh, yeah.
So it's something I've enjoyed for a while. I'd love to do more of it. I think I'm always going to be a sort of a static illustrator primarily, but I love messing about with this stuff. Yeah.
Cool. There was a question before about Bill, what is your favorite media? Not sure how you want to answer that.
Media.
I'll
just take that as all forms of media. I think music's my favorite media. I think I like music more than I like art, ironically. I think if I had the choice... Yeah, I think... I don't know. But I think if I had a chance to be... If I could be good at art or good at music, I think I would have chosen music. It just looks like much more fun.
Wow. It looks like more fun.
I'm not. I don't play music at all. I have zero musical talent. But I'd love to be. I think that's my more favorite kind of media. Yeah.
And another question here. Have you used the animation features in Fresco?
I have not yet. I have not given them a go. I'm always surprised every time I open Fresco, they've got like the new features that have been added. And I saw that it was one that came up recently, and they've added a few more things to the timeline. But no, I haven't had a play around with it yet. I should give it a go though, because lots of the frame-by-frame stuff features in that are really, really good.
Yeah. And I mean, you've got a lot of experience with animating at this stage. I mean, even frame-by-frame, I think we did stream years ago with frame-by-frame animation stuff.
Yeah. And you can do lots of that in Photoshop, but I should give it a go in Fresco because it's lots of fun to do messing about on the iPad.
Just in terms of like teaching yourself, so sort of talking about learning After Effects kind of not commercially, but kind of picking it up. Any tips or advice for people? Is there anyone specific you learned things from? Is it just a lot of Googling? Do you set yourself a task or a project, or is it more about following a tutorial? What was your approach?
Most of my approach is, I think the journey or the cycle is to dive straight into it, fail quickly, get incredibly frustrated, and then slowly limp my way back to watching tutorials on YouTube and figuring out how to do it. So that's the emotional journey I go through. Yeah.
Awesome.
I'm just playing back the animation now. I've just added a little bit of... I wanted to try seeing if we could almost... Because we're kind of looking at this animation from the top down, but I wanted to see if we could view it a little bit from the side. So I've used a warping tool to kind of warp the frame a little bit as we zoom out. I don't know if that works at all, but it's a thing I just did. Anyway. Any other questions before... Any other questions before we wrap up today?
Okay, I don't know. I don't super understand this question, so I'm just going to read it out. When there's a voiceover, would you pre-compose your apple and time remap it to extend to the length of the voiceover?
I've done similar things before. I think they're kind of asking about, like, do you time your animation to the voiceover, or do you do you pre-time it, or do you make the animation and then time it? I would definitely, what I do is when I have a voiceover, I listen back to the voiceover and I write down timestamps for each section that I want. Yeah. And then I work the animation to that existing timeline. And I find that so much easier than trying to retrofit the animation afterwards. So I would definitely time the voiceover first and then start working on the animation using those timestamps. That's how I do it, but other people could do it that way. Yeah,
I like that. I'm glad you got that because I did miss that bit of context. But hey, we are all done. It's been great hanging out with you. Thank you so much, Bill. As I said, that was just such a fun stream.
Cool.
Took me in places I didn't know we were going to go today, which is just awesome. And thank you everyone in chat. It's been a great chat today. Thank you for all the fantastic questions. where is my window? Just going to take over the screen a little bit. We have a really great stream next week, and that's not coming through at all. Doesn't matter about it. I'll just tell you about it. We've got Ramesh Hari Krishnasamy coming on, and we're going to be looking at double exposure next week, which would be really great in Photoshop. So please join us for that. But Bill, thanks again. It's been great hanging out with you.
No worries.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for tuning in, everyone. And thanks, as always, Flynn. I'll see you guys next time.
See you next time.